I am Lonnie, a 34-year-old architect specializing in sustainable building design. For 7 years, I have been married to Melissa, a marketing executive whose career has been skyrocketing at her prestigious firm. We balance each other well most days, her outgoing social personality complementing my more thoughtful, reserved approach. But lately, there has been tension about our professional identities, especially when her work events roll around. I never imagined a company party would become the crossroads of our marriage, revealing truths neither of us was prepared to face. Before I tell you how my wife's mockery backfired and changed our lives forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. When I first met Melissa at a mutual friend's gallery opening, I was immediately drawn to her confidence and vivacity. She commanded attention in every room, while I preferred to observe and listen. I had just established my own small architecture firm focusing on sustainable design projects. Unlike many of my peers who chased lucrative commercial skyscrapers, I found purpose in creating environmentally responsible spaces that served communities rather than just corporate interests. My latest project involved designing affordable housing with minimal environmental impact for a veterans community. The work was meaningful but rarely glamorous enough for cocktail party conversations. I took pride in my attention to detail, my commitment to sustainability, and my ability to work within constrained budgets to create beautiful, functional spaces. Melissa worked at Pinnacle Marketing, one of the most competitive firms in the city. She had climbed from entry-level to senior manager in record time, impressing everyone with her strategic thinking and client relationship skills. Her recent promotion to director put her directly under Richard Montgomery, the CEO, who was known for his exacting standards and no-nonsense leadership style. Our marriage generally worked well despite our personality differences. I supported her ambitions, attending the occasional work function and helping her practice presentations. She claimed to appreciate my stability and integrity, often calling me her rock. But over the past year, as her professional circle expanded, I noticed subtle changes in how she referred to my work and personality when we were among her colleagues. The first time it happened was at a casual dinner with her team. When someone asked about my profession, Melissa quickly answered before I could, emphasizing the commercial aspects of my portfolio and glossing over the community projects that were my true passion. When I gently corrected her, mentioning my current veterans housing project, she smiled tightly and changed the subject. As the annual Pinnacle Marketing Gala approached, Melissa became increasingly anxious about making the right impression. This event was more than just a party. It was a carefully orchestrated networking opportunity, where careers could be made or broken. Richard Montgomery used the occasion to assess his team not just on their professional accomplishments, but on their personal judgment and social acumen. 3 weeks before the gala, Melissa insisted we go shopping for new attire. At the upscale department store, she rejected my preference for a classic navy suit. "You need something with more impact, Lonnie. Something that says power and confidence," she said, pulling out a flashier designer option that felt nothing like me. I compromised on a charcoal gray suit that walked the line between my comfort and her expectations. The evening before the gala, Melissa initiated what felt like a coaching session over dinner. "I need you to be more assertive tomorrow night," she said, swirling her wine. "Richard respects people who command attention. Just speak up more, maybe mention the Thompson commercial building you consulted on rather than the low-income housing thing." I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. "Why should I downplay work I am proud of?" I asked. She sighed. "Lonnie, these people operate in a different world. They respect big budgets and high-profile clients, not community service projects, however noble they might be. Just for one night, can you present yourself differently?" For me, I agreed though. Uneasiness lingered. Was she embarrassed by me? By my values? It was just one night, I told myself. I could play the part she needed. The evening of the gala arrived, and Melissa was electric with nervous energy. She looked stunning in her burgundy dress, hair, perfectly styled makeup, flawless. As we drove to the Grand Meridian Hotel, she delivered last-minute instructions like a general before battle. "Remember to mention your work on the university expansion project," she said. "And try to laugh at Richard's jokes, even the bad ones. Oh, and if Brandon tries to dominate the conversation, do not just yield to him like you usually do with loud people. Stand your ground." I nodded, feeling less like her husband, and more like an accessory she was trying to perfect before presentation. The knot in my stomach tightened. The ballroom was impeccably decorated, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over elegantly dressed groups of people engaged in animated conversation. Melissa transformed the moment we entered, her professional persona taking over as she navigated us through the crowd, introducing me with a possessive hand on my arm. During the initial mingling, I did my best to engage with her colleagues, asking thoughtful questions about their work and sharing appropriate anecdotes about mine. I noticed Melissa hovering nearby, occasionally jumping in to redirect conversations or amplify certain points about my career while minimizing others. "This is my husband Lonnie," she told a group of executives. "He just finished a project for Westlake University. It's turning heads in the industry." It was technically true but misleading. I had consulted on one building in a larger campus expansion. My veterans housing project was my primary focus and personal achievement, but she never mentioned it. By the time we were seated for dinner, I was maintaining a pleasant facade while feeling increasingly disconnected from the version of myself Melissa was presenting. We were placed at a table with Melissa's direct colleagues, including Sarah, who seemed genuinely kind, and Brandon, a loud, boastful account manager who I had met briefly at previous functions and instinctively disliked. Richard Montgomery sat at a nearby table, occasionally glancing in our direction. The first course had just been served when Brandon launched into a monologue about his weekend adventure racing expensive sports cars at a private track. "Nothing gets your blood pumping like pushing $300,000 worth of engineering to its limits," he proclaimed, looking directly at Melissa for her reaction. "That's fascinating," Melissa responded with more enthusiasm than his story warranted. "What about you, Lonnie? Did you do anything exciting this weekend?" It was a loaded question. We both knew I had spent the weekend restoring a vintage motorcycle and finishing a custom bookshelf for our home. Before I could respond authentically, Brandon interrupted. "Let me guess, golf. Or are you more of a tennis man?" he asked with the slightest condescending edge. "Actually, I enjoy working with my hands. I restore vintage motorcycles and do woodworking," I answered, honestly deciding in that moment not to downplay my interests. What happened next burned itself permanently into my memory. Melissa laughed, a performative too loud laugh that immediately silenced the table. "Do not let Lonnie fool you," she said to the group. "He spends weekends with his little tools in the garage." Not exactly the epitome of masculinity these days. The table fell uncomfortably silent. She continued clearly, trying to elicit laughter from her colleagues. "I am still trying to get him to be more of a man's man. You know, someone who commands attention when he walks in a room." A few people offered awkward chuckles. Sarah looked down at her plate. Brandon smirked. From the corner of my eye, I caught Richard Montgomery looking over, a slight frown creasing his forehead. The humiliation washed over me in a hot wave. My wife, the person who had promised to be my partner and supporter, had just ridiculed the core of who I was for the entertainment of people whose opinions she valued more than my dignity. I maintained my composure, though I felt physically ill. "If I would excuse myself for a moment," I said quietly, standing and walking calmly toward the exit. I needed air and space to process what had just happened. Outside on the terrace overlooking the city lights, I took deep breaths of the cool evening air. My initial impulse was to call a ride and leave to escape the situation entirely. But something stopped me. Running away would only reinforce Melissa's narrative about me. It would be avoiding conflict rather than addressing it directly. No, I decided. I would not create a scene, but neither would I passively accept being belittled. I would return and be authentically myself. Not the character Melissa wanted me to play, nor an angry husband causing drama, but simply the man I was with, quiet confidence in my own values. When I returned to the table, I had a new resolve. I would no longer try to contort myself into the mold Melissa seemed to want. For the remainder of the dinner, I engaged in conversation, naturally speaking, about my work with genuine enthusiasm when asked, and listening attentively to others without forcing myself into conversations. I noticed Melissa watching me anxiously, trying to gauge if I was upset. I maintained a pleasant demeanor, neither cold nor overly affectionate. This seemed to increase her nervousness, as she was clearly expecting either an angry outburst or wounded withdrawal. After the main course, I excused myself to visit the bar. As I waited for my sparkling water, a voice beside me said, "Magnificent venue, isn't it? They restored all the original Art Deco details during the renovation." I turned to find Richard Montgomery himself standing next to me. Tall, with silver temples and penetrating eyes, he had the commanding presence that came from genuine authority rather than forced posturing. "Yes," I replied. "They did an excellent job preserving the architectural integrity while updating the infrastructure. The original crown moldings are particularly impressive." Richard looked at me with new interest. "Are you in construction?" "I am an architect," I explained. "I specialize in sustainable design." "Fascinating," he said, and to my surprise he seemed genuinely interested. "What are you working on currently?" I decided to be completely honest. "A housing development for veterans transitioning to civilian life." We are implementing several innovative green technologies while keeping costs manageable for residents on fixed incomes. Instead of the dismissive response Melissa had led me to expect, Richard engaged deeply. I was an engineer before I went into business, he confided. I still appreciate people who understand how things actually work, not just how they look. Our conversation flowed naturally to the challenges of balancing aesthetics, functionality, and sustainability. Richard asked insightful questions that demonstrated real knowledge about architectural principles and environmental design. I found myself sharing the creative solutions my team had developed for maximizing natural light and minimizing energy consumption. The integrity of good design is about honoring both the inhabitants and the environment, I explained. Anyone can create something flashy with an unlimited budget. The real challenge is creating something beautiful and functional with constraints. Richard nodded approvingly. That philosophy applies to business as well. True leadership isn't about who talks loudest, but who solves problems with integrity. As we continued talking, other executives joined our conversation. I found myself at the center of an impromptu discussion about sustainable business practices, with Richard repeatedly drawing me in to offer my perspective. Across the room, I could see Melissa watching, her expression a mixture of confusion and anxiety as her boss engaged enthusiastically with the husband she had just mocked. When dinner concluded, Richard tapped his glass for the evening's announcements and awards. After recognizing several team achievements, he surprised everyone with an unscripted comment. I have also had an enlightening conversation tonight with Lonnie, who has shared some innovative approaches to sustainable design that could be relevant to our new headquarters project. We are planning to break ground next quarter, and I believe we should explore incorporating some of these principles. Melissa's mouth actually fell open. Several people at our table turned to look at me with newfound respect. Brandon stared into his wine glass, suddenly very interested in its contents. When Richard finished speaking, he approached me directly and handed me his business card. I would love to continue our conversation in a more formal setting, he said. Would you be available to tour our current offices next week and discuss some preliminary ideas? Absolutely, I responded, offering my own card in return. I would be happy to share some thoughts. Melissa materialized at my side, her hand gripping my arm a little too tightly. Richard, thank you so much for taking an interest in Lonnie's work, she gushed. I have always told him he should showcase his talents more. Richard gave her a measured look. Your husband doesn't need to showcase anything. His expertise speaks for itself. He turned back to me. Tuesday, at 10, my assistant will confirm. After he walked away, Melissa leaned in close. What just happened? She whispered urgently. How did you and Richard get so friendly? We just talked about architecture and design principles, I said simply. He used to be an engineer, so he understands the technical aspects. Her eyes darted around the room. This is incredible, Lonnie. Do you realize what this could mean for both our careers? The casual way she included herself in my potential opportunity, moments after publicly undermining me, crystallized something in my mind. This wasn't a partnership of mutual respect. It was a relationship where my value was measured only by what I could contribute to her social standing. As the evening began to wind down, several of Richard's associates approached to exchange contact information and continue conversations we had started. Brandon attempted to insert himself into one such discussion with a dismissive comment about impractical green design. Richard cut him off with surgical precision. Innovation often seems impractical to those who lack vision, Brandon. That's why we need people who can see beyond current limitations. Brandon retreated, chastened, while Melissa watched the interaction with growing realization of how the evening's power dynamics had shifted. When most guests had departed, I turned to Melissa and spoke quietly so only she could hear. I'm going to call a ride home. What? Why? She asked, panic flashing across her face. We came together. We should leave together. I think it is better if I have some space tonight, I said calmly. What you said at dinner hurt me deeply, and I need time to process it. I was just joking, Lonnie, she whispered frantically, tears welling in her eyes. Everyone exaggerates at these things. Please do not make a scene now, not when you have made such a good impression. I am not making a scene, I replied. I am simply choosing to leave separately. I deserve a partner who respects me whether or not others are watching. As I said my goodbyes to Richard and the remaining executives, thanking them for their time and confirming our upcoming meeting, Melissa stood, frozen tears now streaming down her face. Her carefully constructed image was crumbling, as her colleagues witnessed her distress, contrasted with my composed departure. I walked out alone, carrying with me both the sting of betrayal and the unexpected validation of being valued for exactly who I was. That night in our home, alone with my thoughts, I contemplated our marriage with painful clarity. I loved Melissa, but the woman I fell in love with, and the woman who had humiliated me at the table seemed like two different people. I wondered which one was real, and whether our relationship could survive this revelation. When she returned home the next morning, her eyes were red and puffy. She had clearly been crying all night. "Lonnie, I am so sorry," she began immediately. "I don't know what came over me. I was nervous about impressing everyone, and I went too far." I listened without interrupting, giving her the space to explain herself fully. When she finished, I spoke honestly but without anger. "What hurt most wasn't just what you said, but what it revealed," I told her. "You were willing to diminish me to elevate yourself in front of people whose approval you value more than my dignity. That isn't what partners do." She collapsed onto the couch, fresh tears flowing. I know, and I hate myself for it. I got caught up in this toxic, competitive environment at work, especially with Brandon constantly undermining me. I felt like I needed to play their game to succeed. But why would that include making me the punchline, I asked. "If anyone should have been in your corner, it should have been me." Melissa looked up, her expression raw with realization. "The truth is, I have been jealous of you," she admitted. "You are so comfortable with who you are, so certain of your path. I have been climbing this corporate ladder, playing all these political games, and still feeling like an imposter. When Brandon started his macho posturing, I just reacted. I tried to join in when I should have defended you." Her honesty was a start, but it didn't erase the damage done. "I need some time," I told her. "I am going to stay with my brother for a few days, while we both think about what we want from this marriage." The look of panic on her face was immediate. "Please, Lonnie, we can work through this," she pleaded. "I hope we can," I replied. "But respect is non-negotiable for me. I won't return to a relationship where I have to diminish who I am to make you comfortable." The following week, as I settled into the spare room at my brother's apartment, an email arrived from Richard Montgomery, confirming our meeting and expressing interest in potentially contracting my firm for consultation on Pinnacle's new headquarters environmental design. The project represented an opportunity I had never anticipated: professional recognition on a significant commercial project, where I could implement my sustainable design principles on a larger scale than ever before. The irony wasn't lost on me that this opportunity came directly from being authentically myself, not from trying to be the person Melissa thought would impress her colleagues. During our separation, I reconnected with old friends and joined a men's support group, where I met other professionals navigating similar challenges. Through these conversations, I gained perspective on what true partnership should feel like and what healthy masculinity meant to me. Not dominance or shallow confidence, but integrity, purposeful work, and authentic relationships. Melissa, meanwhile, began therapy to understand her behavior and insecurities. Our cautious phone conversations revealed her growing awareness of how she had been trying to mold herself and me to fit others' expectations, losing sight of the values that had initially brought us together. After 3 weeks apart, we agreed to meet with a marriage counselor. In those sessions, Melissa expressed genuine remorse, not just for the public humiliation, but for the pattern of subtle undermining that had preceded it. I acknowledged my own failure to communicate how her behavior had been affecting me, choosing conflict avoidance over honest confrontation. What became clear through counseling was that we both had work to do, she in rebuilding trust and examining her need for external validation, and I in establishing clearer boundaries and expressing my needs directly. The question was whether we were both willing to do that work. 6 months later, my consultation with Pinnacle had evolved into a major contract for their new headquarters, incorporating cutting-edge sustainable technologies that would save the company millions in energy costs over the building's lifetime. The project received recognition in several industry publications, highlighting the innovative approach we had taken. Richard Montgomery invited us both to a dinner celebrating the finalization of the architectural plans. Melissa, now more secure in her own professional identity, after making some significant changes in her approach at work, stood beside me as I explained the design concept to the assembled executives. "You found yourself quite a visionary," Richard said to her with genuine respect. "We would never have considered these approaches without his influence." "I know," she replied, looking at me with pride that felt authentic for the first time in years. "He has taught me that real strength comes in many forms. I'm still learning to recognize it." That night, walking home hand in hand under a canopy of stars, Melissa turned to me with tears in her eyes again, but different tears this time. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she said softly. When you walked out that night, I realized I might lose the most important person in my life because I couldn't see his true value. I'm still sorry, but I'm also grateful for the wake-up call. I squeezed her hand gently. Sometimes we need to lose someone's approval to gain our self-respect. I am glad we found our way back to each other. The journey had been painful but necessary. I had discovered that true masculinity wasn't about posturing or dominance, but about standing firmly in my own values even when challenged. Melissa had learned that respect must be the foundation of any meaningful relationship, and that trying to change someone to fit others' expectations only diminishes the very qualities that make them special. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when someone close tried to change who you are? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in authenticity. Remember, the right people will respect you for who you really are. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be yourself. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to stand in your truth, whatever that may be.